I mean, for you, you are a different person now. Your energy and the way that you walk into a room is completely different than it was in the past. And you look for that in conversations. Where is the energy? Where are the lows? Where are the highs? Constantly. And then you take a crowbar sometimes and you pry open that door of energy.
Welcome to the Pioneers of Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal, and this is the show where we dive into our guests' lives, their shared experience, and what enabled them to create meaningful and lasting change in themselves, their communities, and their organizations. This week, I'm joined by Lisa Pachence, the owner of LP Coaching. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this.
I'm thrilled to have you. So tell us a bit about LP Coaching.
Ooh, where to start? So LP Coaching is a boutique life and leadership coaching organization. So I tend to work with underfulfilled, overachieving executives, those who are at a crossroads in their careers. They either want to move up or move out, and sometimes both. And I work with these individuals because I was that individual. I found myself at a point in my career where I felt like I reached the pinnacle and I had no idea what was next. I knew that I was underfulfilled and that there were a lot of shoulds in my space. I should be happy. I should be grateful. I should take this opportunity. And I couldn't seize the moment for many reasons. And that's when I came across coaching.
Well, we're going to get to that story and how you came to that inflection point. With all of our guests, we like to chat about their childhood, right? So did little Lisa see herself as an executive coach?
Well, I certainly never saw myself as an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Tell us.
I was always the second place superstar. I was the workhorse. I was the person that took orders and did it to the extreme.
The good soldier.
I was the good soldier.
Okay.
I was a great second place guard, or however you want to say it. And I don't know if you knew this about me, but I played high level soccer growing up, and that was
travel
soccer.
Soccer.
Yes. So I was of that generation, right after the Mia Hamm and the Brandy Chastain and the 1990 Olympic team. And I kind of grew up in that era, and that's when women's soccer started to come onto the scene. So I was part of this surge of teams and athleticism in New Jersey, which is where I grew up. That was a very formidable part of my childhood, my upbringing, my mindset as well. And it was a very interesting time and place to be where, there were a lot of things going on. Travel sports was starting to become more of a thing. Women's sports was starting to become more of a thing, and yet the science hadn't quite caught up there yet. There was a lot of, I would say, toxicity and injuries, and just the sort of thing, because science hadn't caught up yet. The research hadn't caught up yet.
Toxicity and coaching styles. Real hard coaching.
Yes. So
screaming at the players,
verbal abuse. There was a lot of physical abuse as well. And I was fortunate to never experience that. But I grew up in that era. And from that experience, I thought I was going to go absolutely into some sort of athletic something or other, whether it was going to be physical therapy or whether it was going to be coaching teams. I was fascinating with the way that teams came together, how team cultures came together or didn't come together, which was the case in a lot of situations. But what I found were these little breadcrumbs of what I found fascinating during my most impressionable times in the 90s and the early 2000s growing up. And how interested I became in the human behavior aspect, the sports psychology aspect of it. And so in hindsight, the work that I'm doing now kind of rotates back, but I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I didn't think that I had the guts or, frankly, the intelligence. My parents Certainly, my dad has a PhD in biophysics, and my mom was one of the only women who graduated from Columbia Medical School. And so I was like, well, my mom owns a practice, my dad runs a consultancy, my brother's absolutely brilliant, and then there's me. I'm a good soldier. I take orders and do orders. So yeah, I never thought that I would be in this place and time and have a job and a career and a craft that is my life's purpose.
And coaching definitely is a craft. You started your career in
Recruiting.
recruiting. Tell us a little bit about that. You interviewed lots of people. You were recruiting for what types of positions?
Yeah. So my first job out of college, I was recruiting for Teach for America. Are you familiar with Teach for America?
I am, but for our guests who may be around the world, please inform them.
Okay. Teach for America is an incredible organization, and their mission is to bring high-level educators and education into impoverished areas, that your quality of education should not be limited by your zip code.
Okay.
And even just speaking about it, like it really gets to the heart of me, especially since I'm a mom now. I would never want my child to be restricted in his education because of where he lives or because of his zip code or because of limited access. Education is such a possibility maker. It's a game changer. It's the thing that propels you to opportunities. So I was very passionate about the mission. I was recruited to be a recruiter for their team. I learned a tremendous amount and then found myself after that experience at a startup incubator company that ended up turning out companies like Gilt Group and Business Insider and MongoDB, big companies. I was very, very fortunate there. And I ended up moving into various positions of recruiting. But in actuality, in hindsight, I was much more of a talent acquisition manager in most of these positions. Maybe not necessarily for Teach for America, but recruiting is a bit more reactive. It's a bit more immediate. Recruiting is kind of a broad scope, filling open positions, period. Whereas talent acquisition is about building relationships, building a strategy and a vision, showcasing the brand of the company in such a way that aligns with the talent coming in, their future and the future of the company. And so there's lots of layers to this very beautiful landscape of relationships and partnerships. And I found myself in backwards engineering my background that's actually what I was doing more of. I was building relationships. I was keeping front of mind. I was keeping in touch with individuals. I enjoyed following up and following through with high talent and maintaining that to the point where, sometimes we create a position just to have that person there. And then the most recent position before I became a coach, I was recruiting, I was director of recruitment and selection for Northwestern Mutual in Manhattan. So I was running a team of recruiters, I was filling open positions, but more so I was doing just what I was talking about, talent acquisition. And that fascinated me because there were certain elements of human beings that would walk into my office and I would immediately know were not right for the position. And it didn't matter what was on their resume. That person walked through the door and showed up into the room with qualities, and I intuitively knew, the aura. Yeah. There was an aura about them.
What was it about people that you could say they're absolutely not right for this place?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm a believer that intuition is just science we haven't uncovered yet. It's intuitive or intellectual hits that we don't have language for. And in the brain, your emotions actually don't have language. Your frontal lobe does, but your emotions are located elsewhere in your amygdala. I might be getting the biology wrong there, so bear with me. But because of that, there's quite a bit of human relating that you won't necessarily be able to explicitly tell. Now, having become a coach and studied human behavior, I understand that when someone walked into a room and let's say they were a little bit hunched over and they were closed off and maybe they didn't look me in the eye, they looked down, they were gruff or serious. There's a way of being that is holistic to a person that one can tell when someone walks into the room, how they're going to be. Now, there are cases that that's not correct, which is why you still have the conversation and see what happens. Sometimes it just takes a little bit to open that person up and, oh, maybe they're an introvert and they could be coached on being a little bit more open, energetically, emotionally, dare I say spiritually, intellectually open, more trusting. It became really obvious very quickly that it's not someone's pedigree or resume that gets you hired. It's actually character. And that is factually accurate, that recruiters hire first on character, second on experience, and third on resume, which is why it's so vitally important to build out your network, your champions, your relationships, your board of advisors, that weak connections conversation. The second degree connections are the ones that open up the doors. And 80% of jobs out there are never posted publicly. 80%.
80%. So let's talk, we'll just briefly one more thing on this.
Yes.
What would you say is your worst interview that you've ever had in that role? And then we'll get to your inflection point.
I'm pretty sure this young man was horrifically hungover.
Oh my. Okay. Did that person come in or was it a Zoom?
Oh, yes. He walked in the door. Great
no.
resume. I believe he was maybe referred or his father was in the business and he came through the door. Rumpled shirt. I think he forgot his jacket. I mean, it's a financial services and advising organization that's pretty old school, Northwestern Mutual.
Absolutely. Polished.
Yeah. I mean, people who show up in suits and, you better put on your cologne and practice your handshake sort of thing. Oh man.
Handshake, look in the face.
He might have still been drunk to be honest. I don't think he hit the hangover. But it was also Manhattan and I saw a lot of people through the door. I would have 6, 7, sometimes 8 interviews in a day. I'd just talk to people and ask questions all day long.
And how do you maintain your composure through that, right? I mean, that's really mentally difficult to do a 1.5 hour screening interview with somebody back to back.
Well, I have to say, and we'll probably get to this conversation later, that I struggled. I certainly struggled with my well-being and my stamina through all of this. Frankly, I would get to the end of a long day and I'd feel like I did a terrible job, partly because I was so worn out and my foundations weren't strong enough yet that I couldn't comport myself to the level that was required in that job. And it wasn't every single day. It was about 3 or 4 days a week.
3 or 4 days a week. So 60 to 80% of the week. So it's a good jump off point to talk about the inflection. You led off the interview saying that you came to this point where this was not satisfying and you needed something else for yourself. So
Yes.
Tell us about how you came to that epiphany.
Yes. I was an overachiever that was undersatisfied for no fault of my job or my boss or the organization. I have such fond memories actually of working at Northwestern Mutual, and they treated me admirably. And I noticed that there was a calling within me to do something more, better. I had no idea. The other thing I noticed is that my stamina at this job was not sufficient. I needed stamina training. And frankly, I needed leadership training. So luckily in my networking in Manhattan, I ran into a coach. I had one coaching conversation with her. And in one coaching conversation, I was able to shift things that a decade of therapy couldn't shift. Which at that time, I believe it was 2012, 2011, was a very avant-garde conversation. Coaching really didn't swing onto the scene in popularity until about 2016, 2017. And it's the second fastest growing industry in the world, only second to technology today. Yeah, it still is. I noticed that while I could have insight about what was happening, that I was getting worn out, I was getting burnt out, I was not properly developing diplomatic relationships in the office. There was a very clear gap in, dare I say it, corporate politics that I was missing, and leadership skills, basic emotional intelligent leadership skills. And number one, I was able to build some of those skills, things like being able to enroll people in our mission, our vision, what we were doing for the department for the next 90 days or the next year. I was also able to clarify my values and when things did and didn't align in a way that was operational. It wasn't just, that's right, that's not right.
Was this coach somebody provided by Northwest Mutual or someone you found on your own?
Yeah, this is someone outside of Northwest Mutual.
Outside of Northwest.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I also noticed that I was not taking responsibility for my own well-being, for my own boundaries, and for my own purpose, my own clarity of where I wanted to go within the organization. There are two basic levels that a leader needs to work on in their role. They need to work on leading in their own career, their own sense of purpose. Where do they want to go? How do they want to develop? And I was not being at cause for that, and I was not being responsible.
So leading themselves.
That's the self-leadership component.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And coaching can be fantastic in drawing that out and clarifying what that is. And then the second component is creating a sense of purpose, direction, and clarity for the organization. And a leader has to be able to manage both at the same time, find that Venn diagram overlap, and hold that space with care and intention for as long as possible. I wasn't doing either of that. Working with his coach brought those two levels in alignment. And after about 6 months of working with her, I found that it was the type of work that I couldn't not pursue myself.
So you were attracted to this profession because you had a great experience with a coach.
Because I had a great experience and I wanted to develop myself.
And you grew.
I grew
under this coaching.
Correct. And then I went to a school thinking that I might bring some of those leadership and coaching dynamics into my organization. Ended up falling in love with entrepreneurship, which was wacky to me. And here I am today, 13 years later.
13 years later. How many people have you coached? Well, first of all, I have a very fundamental, maybe silly question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between coaching and therapy?
Oh, it's a great question. So I have a bit of a parable in response.
Okay.
So coaching, therapy, and consulting are often confused and are honestly siblings to each other. So let's say someone falls into a hole. The therapist walks by and says, how do you feel about the hole? How do you think your family dynamics fit into you falling into the hole in your first place? What would you say your relationship is with your father that has you in this hole? Let's say a consultant walks by and says, here are 5 ways to get out of the hole, and I'll teach you any one of those 5. You choose. The coach walks over to the person in the hole and says, hey, you're in a hole. What would you like to do about that? So coaching is about the present, the present moment to the future. And it's always future directed. Where are we going? What does that mean to you? Why is that important to you? And developing a sense of what is going on in the moment, the insight, the awareness, the choice, the responsibility to be able to get you forward. Whereas therapy is present and backwards looking. It's figuring out why you are now the way you are based on your past. I think both are incredibly important. And then consulting gives you skills that you might not necessarily have had. Honestly, it's very similar to tutoring, to having a tutor that supports gaps in education.
Consultants are going to give you the business plan or the action plan to go get the fish.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, consulting is giving a man a fish, and coaching is teaching a man to fish.
Teaching the man to fish.
Fish for a lifetime.
And therapy is, why do I want to fish?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I fished with my father
yes.
when I was young. Okay, good. Beautiful. So you went to school for coaching. How long was that process to get a certification? And then your first client, how did you go about marketing yourself?
These are great questions. So my coach training program was a year long.
Okay.
There was only 4 programs available at the time, which is wild because there's thousands of credentialed ICF, International Coach Federation programs out there, not to mention all the ones that aren't. Mine was a year long, and within, I'd say, 2 to 3 months, I had my first client. And she was my first and my only pro bono client.
Did you find her on the web? Did she find you through the school?
I made a list of all the people that I would love to work with and practice. Not directly, but, oh, that person might know another person, and I would love to work with people like that.
So you worked your network.
I worked my network.
Worked your network.
Mm-hmm. So it took me a year to graduate, and then it took me another year or two to get my credential, my professional certified coaching credential through the ICF. And I received my master certified coaching credential in 2021. I have over 6,000 one-on-one hours. I have probably over 10,000 hours of training.
Okay.
Training coaches, providing service. I've worked with maybe about 300 individuals. That doesn't count groups or training programs or facilitation.
Let's talk about the 300, right? So I'm asking you to pick one that you feel made the biggest jump in their life, their career, what their expectation was going in, how they grew. Tell a little bit about this person and their story and how you got them there.
So let's call her C.
Okay.
This client of mine, C, worked in talent acquisition. And she was, I believe, an executive VP within an organization. She wanted to develop skills of her own leadership. She wanted to move up or move out within her company. And she also had specific personal goals that she wanted to work on, things like family, marriage, and well-being. Ideal client all the way. She was also a former athlete. She had and has a tremendously open-minded, hardworking mentality. I believe that was 6 years ago. She is now an executive coach.
Oh, interesting.
We worked together for 3 or 4 years. She loved the work so much that she decided to become a coach. But before that, she ended up moving to a fantastic organization, running her own department, getting offers from other corporations because of her work. And once she became a coach, she maintained those relationships to now have, a $1 million company or multi-six-figure company herself, be making impacts everywhere, speaking, facilitation, leading groups. It's an incredible tribute to the work that we've been doing and to the type of person that she was, to be able to have the opportunity to keep growing and making millions upon millions of dollars in those roles. But she decided to follow her heart and be able to make an impact and an income at the same time.
As you have coached these hundreds of people, a lot of self-care is required for that, right? Mm-hmm. So you are dealing with a lot of times people's problems and their struggles, and you're always present with yourself and with them and steering them to get to their place. How do you approach self-care?
It is pivotal. It's like the oxygen mask metaphor. You have to put your oxygen mask on first in order to be able to serve and provide to other people. It's pivotal. It's crucial. It's often the first place that I go to when I start working with executives and leaders is how is your self-care? How are you treating yourself? How are you talking to yourself? What are the stories that you're telling yourself about your own foundations? And there's an interesting thing that happens. Oftentimes in our modern culture, we think we have to go from performance to rest to performance and just go straight there. What ends up happening is you go into performance, you go into stress, you go into burnout, and then you rest. That's what happens because there's a mentality that that rest is a reward. You have to work hard first before you rest, rather than looking at it from, let's say, an athletic perspective. That rest and recuperation, that off seasons are actually some of the times to build the most. Rest and recuperation is a major part in being able to perform highly. You do have to go from performance to rest, performance to rest. So there's a set of practices that I have, and there's also a trademark exercise that I created that maps out the top 10 keys to supporting well-being for busy, high-performing executives. And interestingly enough, self-care, resting, recuperating, sleeping is only one of the 10. There are many other components, things like connection, compassion, friendship, boundaries, life's purpose, your culture and the people around you. We are the sum of the 5 people we hang out with the most. How are we forming that community around us? There's so many components that we're not thinking of. When we think of self-care, we think of rest, hydration, eat well, sleep, maybe play a game on your phone. And it's just not the case. It's very nuanced.
It's really a well-balanced life.
Yes.
We perform better when we have connection with friends, when we recover from the stress, right? As you are an athlete, I'm a runner. As you train hard, you break down tissue, and it needs rest in order to rebuild that muscle and tissue in order to perform at a higher level. And that purpose, life's purpose is extremely important. Without that North Star, we tend to wander like a flailing fish, looking for its food.
And it might change. Purpose might change. But at its core, it probably stays relatively the same, although the wording and the description of it might adjust a little bit. For instance, when I was younger, service and impact and making a difference in communities. I traveled to Nicaragua and Costa Rica and helped to rebuild schools and communities and playgrounds, and that morphed into more of a being a support for the leaders that then make the difference on the ground, the nonprofit leaders, the executives. At its core, my purpose is impact and connection.
So if there's one takeaway you would like to leave our listeners with that have enabled you to make this transition to help others create impact in their lives and in their jobs, what would be that one thing?
Notice what you think is impossible. What do you think is currently impossible? And then seek out someone to help you work yourself through that and make that possible.
Well, Lisa Pachence, you are a pioneer of possibility, helping people achieve the impossible. With that, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
This episode of the Pioneers of Possibility has been produced and edited by Danny Vagnoni, with music credits going to the artist known as Sahari, and artwork for our podcast is presented by the artist known as Layla. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode and you would like to hear more from future episodes, please follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and click the subscribe button on YouTube. And please leave a comment so we can engage our listeners. Thank you very much. See you next time.